I have a superpower. I can see the name of everyone's true love. But today, I discovered something shocking. The name on my wife's arm had changed. Victoria and I have been married for 3 years, but lately, she's been distant. As I sat next to her while she slept, I pulled up her sleeve. The name on her arm wasn't mine anymore. I knew it. She was cheating on me. I grabbed my phone, ready to contact a divorce lawyer. But then I noticed a sudden deposit of $1 million in my bank account from a property settlement. Victoria was fast asleep beside me, but I couldn't stop tossing and turning. Over the past 3 years of marriage, her behavior had gradually changed. The good morning and good night texts, once consistent, had vanished. She'd come home from work and fall asleep immediately. My gut told me something was wrong. My superpower had first revealed itself during college. A roommate got married, and I noticed that both he and his wife had each other's names on their arms. At first, I thought it was a matching tattoo, but no one else could see it. Over time, I realized this was proof of true love. My roommate and his wife were still blissfully happy 5 years into their marriage. When I started dating Victoria and saw my name on her arm, I was thrilled. When she proposed to me, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Yet, oddly enough, my own arm remained blank. I didn't dwell on it back then. Our first years together were genuinely happy. But today, everything changed. The name on Victoria's arm was gone, replaced by the name of her assistant, Liam. She was cheating on me. I refused to accept it without proof. I took Victoria's phone. In 3 years of marriage, I had never snooped, but this time I couldn't help myself. Her primary messaging app showed her conversations with Liam were clean, strictly work-related. But then I logged into her secondary account. Sure enough, Liam's contact was pinned to the top, labeled, "Darling." I quietly got out of bed and sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, tears streaming down my face. Memories of our time together flooded my mind. Even true love can fade with time, it seems. The next morning, Victoria got up for work. I dressed sharply and watched her leave. As she leaned in to kiss me goodbye, I bent down to tie my shoelace. "Sorry, no shoelaces on slippers. You're going to be late," I said, standing up straight. Victoria looked disappointed but quickly brushed it off with a cold I couldn't help but scoff internally. A woman who cheats and still wants affection? Ridiculous. After contacting a lawyer, I was advised to gather more evidence of her infidelity. That evening, I waited in the parking lot of her office. Around 7 p.m., Victoria sent me a text. "Honey, I have to work late tonight." Work late? She was already in the parking lot. Moments later, Liam climbed into her car, and they embraced like lovers reunited after a long separation. My chest ached, but I grabbed my phone and snapped pictures for evidence. Victoria's car drove off, and I followed discreetly until she parked in front of an upscale restaurant. She and Liam walked in hand. I took photos of them dining together before heading home. At 10 p.m., Victoria returned. She flicked on the living room light, surprised to find me sitting on the couch in the dark. "Honey, why didn't you turn on the lights?" she asked, puzzled. I usually went to bed early. I didn't answer. The glaring light forced me to squint. "What's wrong, honey?" Victoria hurried over to me. "Don't ask. If you ask, it means the show is about to begin," I replied calmly. "Sweetheart, tonight I thought I saw you at a restaurant with another man." Victoria's face froze. "It was just a casual dinner," she stammered. "But I took photos," I said, showing her the images of her and Liam together. "Honey, you have to believe me. Liam closed a major deal for the company, and I treated him to dinner as a reward. That's all," she explained with practiced ease. I sneered inwardly. "Ah, of course. I knew my wife couldn't possibly cheat on me," I said, pulling her into an embrace while suppressing the urge to gag. "But sweetheart, I still feel insecure." I reached for the shelf and took out a prenuptial agreement. Victoria hesitated for a moment but signed it without even reading. "Thank you, darling," I said softly, kissing her cheek. "You're the love of my life." What a joke, I loved money more. The next morning, Victoria stayed home from work for the first time in ages, likely feeling guilty. But what's the point of pretending when there's no love left? I watched her cook breakfast in the kitchen, a rare sight, and called her over. "Sweetheart, let me drive you to work," I offered. Dressed in my best tailored suit, I wrapped my arm around her waist affectionately. "All right," she replied, putting on a convincing show of nonchalance. Clever girl, she could really fake it. Victoria had started her own company right after graduation, supported by her family's resources. Over the years, she'd achieved modest success. I sat in her spacious office, showering her with compliments as she worked. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Victoria's back stiffened immediately. "Miss Summer, here are the documents you requested," Liam said as he walked in. I immediately stood up, walked over, and patted Liam on the shoulder. "Thanks, Liam. You've been a great help to my wife, easing her workload." Liam seemed startled by my sudden gesture and quickly waved his hand, saying, "It's nothing." I pretended to smooth out his shirt and casually remarked, "Liam, this fabric feels great. Where did you get it?" In reality, I was checking the name embroidered on his sleeve, Sophia. Not my cheating wife's name, but still, what an amusing pair of lovebirds. Liam looked a bit flattered and stammered, "Noah, it's just part of my job." As he spoke, he stole a glance at Victoria's expression. "Could you show me around the office?" I asked, patting his shoulder again. After all, I might want to work here too. Victoria clicked her tongue in disapproval. "Honey, I can take care of you. Just enjoy being a happy stay-at-home husband."
"But I want to help share your workload," I said pitifully, giving her a pleading look.
She sighed and waved her hand dismissively. Liam led me around the company for a tour.
"Noah, I heard from Victoria that you used to study design," Liam asked, trying to flatter me.
"Yes," I answered coldly. We stopped by the company bulletin board, where a list of outstanding employees was displayed. There it was, Sophia from the design department. "Thanks, Liam, you can go back to your work now," I said softly. Later, back in Victoria's office, I hugged her from behind. "Honey, let me work in the design department," I whispered. "Why the sudden interest in coming back to work?" Victoria asked. "Seeing you work overtime every day is exhausting." "I just thought I could join you and help out," I said, playfully pinching her nose. "Fine, you can come with me tomorrow. I'll talk to the team lead and arrange it," she replied. "Great," I said cheerfully. The next day, I started working with Victoria at her company. The design department was busy, often requiring overtime. This, of course, made it easier for Victoria to indulge in her extramarital escapades. No wonder she agreed so readily. Sophia was a capable worker with a clear distinction between personal and professional matters. During my month in her team, we often went on business trips and attended department dinners. In group photos, I would often sit next to her. However, privately, we didn't interact much. Then, purely by chance, I discovered she had a fiancé and was planning to get married soon. Few people at the company knew this. When I posted department dinner photos on social media, I made sure only Liam could see them. Back at the office after a business trip, I frequently caught Liam glaring at me with malice. "Don't rush. The show is just beginning," I thought to myself. After a month at Victoria's company, I secretly approached Sophia. "Sophia, let me get straight to the point. I want to poach you," I said. Sophia looked surprised. "You're planning to move back to Seattle next year to settle down after your wedding, aren't you?" I continued. She nodded. "Here's my friend's company in Seattle. I've recommended you to him. With your skills, staying at Victoria's company is a waste of talent," I said regretfully. I handed her my friend's business card. "This company needs no introduction. It's a top-tier design firm, practically a no-brainer decision. Just contact him," I added. Sophia seemed like she wanted to say something, but I nodded and left before she could. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for the right moment. The next day, Sophia resigned. Liam, sensing drama, showed up right away. In the break room, while pretending to make coffee, I watched Liam grab Sophia's hand gently and say, "Sophia, why are you leaving?" Sophia quickly shook off his hand and replied, "I'm moving to Seattle to settle down. I found a job opportunity there." "Where are you planning to work?" Liam pressed on. "It's not finalized yet, but I have a connection introducing me to a big company," Sophia said. "A big company? Which one?" Liam's eyes lit up. I recommended her. "Why? Got a problem with that?" I said, stepping forward. Liam's gaze shifted to me, but still burned with resentment. As the boss's husband, poaching employees for other companies isn't exactly ethical, is it? Does Victoria know? Liam said mockingly. The boss's husband? Isn't that the role you're after? Feel free to take it, I replied casually. What do you mean? Liam stammered, suddenly flustered like a cockroach caught underfoot. Nothing, I said, strolling out of the break room leisurely, leaving Liam shouting behind me. Soon, this little drama reached Victoria's ears. When I entered her office, Liam was already there, his face pale with anger. Honey, are you still hung up on what happened last time? Victoria asked, trying to calm him down. No, what last time? I've long forgotten about that, I said, feigning ignorance. Then what did you mean by what you said in the break room? Theo asked angrily. What did I say? Who heard it? I shrugged. Theo glared at me furiously. Poaching employees to other companies, how do you explain that? Theo accused, thinking he had me cornered. Sorry, but I'm getting married soon and planning to settle down in Seattle. Noah was just doing me a favor, Sophia said, stepping in and defending me. Sophia, you're getting married? But I've never heard you mention a boyfriend, Theo said, his eyes widening in shock like he'd been struck by lightning. His face turned pale, clearly devastated. Victoria noticed Theo's odd reaction and quickly asked him to leave the office. Sophia's resignation was processed swiftly. Before leaving, she even came by to thank me personally. The design department threw her a farewell party. Though Sophia appeared cold, she was genuinely kind-hearted. No wonder Theo had been secretly in love with her for a long time. I texted Summer, letting her know I'd be home late because of a dinner gathering. She didn't even hesitate before agreeing and mentioned she'd be working overtime at the office. At 8 p.m., as the party was at its peak, I excused myself and headed out. But instead of going home, I drove toward the office. In the elevator, I silently counted down the floor numbers. The entire floor was shrouded in darkness, but unexpectedly I heard voices arguing. It was Summer and Theo. What's that supposed to mean? Eating from one bowl while eyeing the other? No, babe, you've misunderstood, Theo's voice coaxed softly. Oh, so my darling wife is out there being someone's lapdog? I listened silently as I watched Theo pull Summer tightly into his arms. Does your husband know you're cheating on him? Theo whispered into her neck. So what if he does? He'd never divorce me, Summer replied confidently as she leaned in to kiss him on the lips. The other day when he saw us out at dinner, I just made up some excuse and he believed me. He's so easy to fool. Her words were dripping with mockery, as if she thought I was utterly clueless. Theo chuckled as he kissed her back. How about we head to your husband's desk? Let's spice things up. Summer smiled, wrapping her legs around Theo's waist as he half carried her toward my workstation. My fists clenched tightly. Even though I had already confirmed Summer's infidelity, witnessing it firsthand sent a chill through me. I turned and left the building, driving to a friend's house for the night. All night long I prepared the materials in my hands. Summer, I've never been a fool. The next morning I stepped into the office right on time. Glancing at my desk, which remained exactly as I had left it, no one could have guessed what had transpired there the night before. I kicked my chair hard, startling a nearby colleague. What's wrong, Noah? I had a good rapport with my coworkers, and they quickly rushed over to check on me. Nothing. I just lost the wedding ring I usually wear, I replied coolly. Everyone started helping me search high and low, but the ring was nowhere to be found. Noah, maybe you left it at home or it fell off somewhere on your way in, someone suggested. Impossible. I left it on my desk yesterday and forgot to put it away. Now it's missing. Someone must have taken it. At my words, everyone exchanged uneasy glances. No worries, I'll just check the security footage. I got up and headed to Summer's office. As soon as she saw me, she frowned. Why didn't you come home last night? You didn't even reply to my messages. I stayed at a friend's place, I replied coldly. By the way, the ring you gave me is missing from my desk. I'm going to check the security cameras. Her expression shifted dramatically. I'll just buy you a new one. If it's gone, it's gone, she said hurriedly, clearly panicking at the thought of me reviewing the footage. Unexpected. So she still knew how to feel shame. I went straight to the security room and copied the footage from the previous night. Back at my desk, I plugged in the USB drive. My coworkers, curious, gathered around me. "This is the footage I just pulled. Let's watch it together and see who the culprit is." I fast-forwarded to 8 p.m. the previous evening. Within moments, the screen lit up with the unmistakable scene of two passionate bodies at my workstation. The camera had caught their faces clearly. Gasps erupted from everyone around me. "That's the boss," and his assistant, someone whispered in disbelief. Each face in the crowd was filled with shock and intrigue. The commotion must have been loud because Theo quickly arrived, his expression darkening as he saw the footage on the screen. He froze, his face turning bright red, speechless with embarrassment. "What?" "I was just checking the footage and accidentally uncovered this filthy behavior," I said, my voice icy. Hearing the commotion, Summer rushed over. The moment Theo saw her, he instinctively pulled her into his arms. Summer, realizing what was happening, quickly pushed him away. "So, when faced with public disgrace, true love amounts to nothing. What's the meaning of this?" Summer asked, hastily shutting off the video. "Nothing much, just an unexpected discovery while checking the footage for my missing ring. Turns out my wife and her assistant were having an affair on my desk," I replied emotionlessly. "You've got it all wrong, Noah. Let me explain." Summer grabbed my hand, her voice pleading. "Get back to work, everyone, stop gawking," she suddenly yelled at the gathered crowd. "Oh, so you do know this is shameful. Then why did you do it in the first place?" I sneered, shaking off her hand. "You didn't have to air our dirty laundry in public," she muttered, her voice lowering. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted things to escalate this far?" I suddenly shouted, drawing everyone's attention to us. Without hesitation, I slapped Summer hard across the face. "Did you think our marriage would reach this point without you being at fault?" Summer, as if deciding to abandon all pretense, yelled back, "Fine, let's go crazy together. What did I do wrong, huh? Tell me." I glared at her, my voice sharp. 3 years of marriage, and you couldn't even give me a child. What kind of man does that make you? You don't even have a proper career, and you couldn't fulfill such a basic request." Summer's face twisted into an ugly sneer, her composure completely shattered. "And you think it's my fault we couldn't have kids?" I let out a bitter laugh, pulling the documents from my bag. "From the moment we got married, I'd wanted children. Part of it was my love for kids, and the other reason was her family's pressure to continue their lineage. We had agreed that our first child would take her last name, but after 3 years, nothing happened. By our second year of trying, we went to the hospital for tests. The results were clear. Summer had ovarian dysfunction. The day the results came back, Summer had been in a rush to leave for a business trip, so I was the one who picked them up. My medical report came back perfectly normal, but Summer's ultrasound to check her ovulation cycle revealed no dominant follicles on her ovaries. Pregnancy wasn't even a possibility. I feared she'd be devastated, so I chose to keep it all a secret. I printed out 100 copies of Summer's medical report. Whenever she panicked, she'd always blame my infertility, as if the issue of not having children was never hers to consider. I pulled out the thick stack of reports and tossed them into the air. The bold words "ovulation disorder" likely pierced through Summer's defenses. "You're lying," she shouted, as though she refused to believe the truth. But the stamps and names on the report couldn't be fabricated. She stared at the papers in her hand, looking as though her soul had been ripped away. Theo stood frozen beside her, his face pale as he looked at me. "And you," I said, patting his face lightly. "You claim you love Summer, yet your heart belongs to someone else." Theo's hands trembled as I exposed him. He had secretly applied for a transfer to a company in Seattle. "What are you planning to do? Ruin another family and become the mistress?" I chuckled coldly and slapped Theo hard across the face. "You want a promotion and love at the same time? That's a bit greedy, isn't it? Too bad for you. Sophia and her husband are deeply in love. You won't be able to break them apart." Theo said nothing, his eyes filled with shock and fear. "Find some time to finalize the divorce. Don't keep me waiting too long," I told Summer. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the intact engagement ring she had bought for me after earning her first big paycheck. "It's been with me all along, but you were the one who lost it." I said softly, throwing the ring into the air. In that instant, our marriage shattered like the broken ring. By 8 p.m. that evening, I packed up the last of Summer's belongings. This house, a wedding gift from my parents, had been our home. Summer had always insisted on moving into a new place after she started making money, but I found it too much trouble, so we stayed. Over time, I grew accustomed to it. As I was about to leave, the keypad on the door indicated an error. When I opened the door, I saw Summer's defeated face. "Come in, let's discuss the divorce," I said, letting her into the house. "By the way, I've packed up all your belongings and sent them to your mom's place. After today, don't come back here." Summer was silent, unmoved, her demeanor like water off a duck's back. Her lover had been cheating on her. Her husband had outsmarted her, and she would never be able to have children in the future. "Summer," I said gently. Her dull eyes suddenly flickered with a glimmer of hope. I knew exactly what she wanted, but it was already too late. "There's no way we're staying married. Let's get a divorce," I said, stepping forward to place the divorce agreement and the marital property agreement in front of her. Summer stared intently at the cover of the divorce agreement, as though a realization had dawned upon her. "So you knew I was cheating from the very beginning," she said quietly, her gaze void of any emotion. I nodded and handed her a pen. "This marital property agreement, you deliberately made me sign it," she said, her face filled with shock. She seemed unable to fathom how her foolish husband could have outsmarted her. I nodded silently. "Noah, I never expected you to be this clever," she sighed, flipping through the divorce agreement. "You want me to leave with nothing," Summer said, her face shifting from shock to anger. "Look here, your name is on it," I said softly, pointing to her name on the agreement. "Besides, we don't have kids. This house was a gift from my parents. I don't need your car either, just take it with you." "Do you have any other questions?" I asked, turning back to her. "Think carefully, call me if you come up with anything," I added, dismissing her. Summer remained seated, refusing to move. "This is my home, why should I leave?" Summer said as she looked at me. "We're not divorced yet, so this is still my home. I'll sign the agreement, but not today." She seemed determined to make things difficult for me, sitting there with a smug smile. "Get out!" I shouted toward the bedroom. Suddenly, 2 tall, muscular women appeared in my living room. "Throw her out," I said calmly, waving them toward Summer. Though Summer wasn't particularly slim, her lack of exercise over the years made it easy for the well-trained women to carry her out. As she was dragged away, she cursed me for being an unfaithful husband. "You're not nearly clever enough to take me on," I said with a smirk. A month later, I successfully regained my freedom. Looking at the steady balance of $1 million in my bank account, I chuckled to myself. It seemed like I'd never have to work again. I sold the house my parents had given me and crashed at a friend's place. Day after day, I drowned my sorrows in alcohol at the bar where my friend worked. The days of being a stay-at-home husband seemed to have blown away with the wind. A group of gorgeous women walked in. "Want to take a look?" my friend whispered in my ear. "Sure, why not?" I replied eagerly. 10 minutes later, 10 uniquely beautiful women filled the private room. "Do you like them?" my friend asked softly. "They're beautiful, but all missing something," I muttered. "What's missing?" my friend pressed. Just then, a woman walked in carrying a bottle of wine. "She's perfect," I said, my eyes lighting up as I stared at the woman who had just entered. My friend froze in shock and quickly stood up. "Hello, I'm Aria, the owner here. I've heard you've been a frequent visitor to our establishment lately. We'd like to offer you some gifts. Next time, feel free to bring your friends along," she said warmly. It turned out to be a beautiful boss. I replied softly, "Thank you," but my eyes remained glued to her. She seemed flustered by my gaze, quickly put down the gift and hurriedly excused herself. "Your boss is stunning," I said, hearts practically popping out of my eyes as I watched her leave. "Don't you remember her?" my friend asked. I shook my head. "I don't recall meeting such a beautiful woman before." "Well, back then your eyes were only on Summer," my friend reminded me. "She even confessed her feelings for you, but you probably forgot. We were all so envious of you at the time. After all, she was the most admired girl on campus. I rejected the campus beauty and treated Summer, that piece of trash like a treasure. Sometimes I really hate how blind I was back then, I muttered bitterly. My friend went off to work while I sent away the women in the private booth and sat alone at the bar, nursing my drink. Being alone didn't seem so bad. I drank one glass after another until the world spun around me. My last memory was hugging a lamppost and shouting, "I have no home." I woke up with a start to find myself lying safe and sound in my friend's bed. Letting out a sigh, I picked up my phone. It was 7 p.m. and I saw a message from my friend sent at midnight. "When you wake up and finish eating, get to the bar and apologize. Our boss is in a bad mood today." What did I do? I texted back in a panic, asking about the beautiful boss. My friend replied almost instantly. "She kindly offered to take you home, and you threw up all over her. If that wasn't bad enough, you hugged a lamppost and caused a scene. And if that wasn't enough, you mistook her for Summer, that scumbag, and slapped her twice." I played dead, lying motionless on the bed. At 8 p.m. I showed up at the bar carrying bags of gifts. My friend saw me and gleefully pointed upstairs. In the office, Aria was staring at her computer. Her pale face bore 2 noticeable red marks. When she saw me, she smiled warmly, making the marks on her face stand out even more. "I'm so sorry." I immediately bowed my head and apologized. She waved her hand, signaling it was okay. "Have you eaten?" We both spoke at the same time. "Then let's eat together," I said, taking out the packed food and avoiding her gaze out of guilt. "I'm really sorry about last night. I'll take full responsibility for your injuries. Whether it's compensation or anything else, I'll handle it." My voice grew quieter and quieter as I spoke. She chuckled lightly, her smile radiant. Aria was undeniably beautiful, but it wasn't an overwhelming kind of beauty. It was the kind that grew on you, like a quiet orchid blooming in a hidden mountain valley. In college, Aria had studied sculpture, and her artistic aura added an air of mystery to her. "It's okay. These marks will probably fade in a few days," she said softly. I quickly handed her the medicine I had bought. "Thank you," she said, hesitating briefly. "Did we know each other in college?" I tried to make conversation. She suddenly straightened up, her face turning red. "Do you remember when I confessed my feelings to you back then?" she asked cautiously. "I don't really remember," I replied awkwardly. "Ah, it was just a silly thing from our youth. Don't worry about it," I said with a forced laugh, trying to brush it off. "But I still care," she said firmly, catching me off guard. "What do you mean?" My mind went blank. Was she haunted by unrequited love, or was it something else that she couldn't let go of? "Are you and Summer happy?" she asked seriously. "She cheated on me." "We're divorced," I said quietly, looking into her eyes. A flicker of amusement appeared in her gaze. It was schadenfreude. "Then, would you consider looking back at me?" I was so startled I dropped my chopsticks. She calmly handed me a new pair, her composure unwavering. "Take your time. I'm not in a rush," she said softly, picking up food for me. I silently stuffed food into my mouth, feeling both uneasy and overwhelmed. Freshly divorced, and I already had a potential romance? After dinner, I said goodbye to Aria. As I was leaving, she grabbed my arm. "Don't feel pressured. Let's start as friends." "Hi, I'm Aria, the owner of Yang Bar," she said, suddenly introducing herself. Her unexpected formality caught me off guard, and my heart raced. "Hi, I'm Noah, currently unemployed," I replied. She shook my hand and then said goodbye. Back at my friend's place, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Was it really possible for someone to hold on to feelings for another person for so long? The next morning, my friend helped me move. When I arrived at the door of my new apartment, I saw Aria standing across from me. "Neighbor?" I asked, looking at her in surprise. This was too much of a coincidence. "Not a coincidence," she said. "I specifically recommended this place to your friend." She took some of my luggage and continued. "Last time when you were drunk, you said you didn't have a home. Your friend told me you'd been staying at his place because you hadn't found the right place yet. I thought this apartment would be perfect for you. It's spacious, has great lighting, and is close to downtown. The rent is a bit pricey, but your friend said money isn't an issue for you." I awkwardly scratched my head. "What about the landlord?" "The landlord is me. If you need anything, just message me," she said. "Thanks," I replied, taking my luggage and opening the door. "Once you're settled in, come over for dinner." "I'll cook," she said with a gentle smile, though her hands nervously fidgeting with the hem of her shirt betrayed her anxiety. I nodded with a smile, feeling like Arya was a pure-hearted girl wrapped in a veneer of confidence. At 7 p.m., I knocked on Arya's door. She greeted me in cozy loungewear, took my shoes, and hurried off to the kitchen to bring out the dishes. "Take a seat, everything's almost ready," her soft voice called from the kitchen. I tried to gather my thoughts, ignoring my friend's suggestion to make a move on Arya. Arya was an excellent cook, and everything she made happened to be my favorite dishes. My appetite surged as I buried my head in the food. She was wearing a Hello Kitty apron, smiling as she watched me eat. There was an inexplicable sense of domesticity about her, making her appear oddly enticing. Startled by my own thoughts, I coughed involuntarily. Arya quietly went to the living room to pour me a glass of water. The meal left me feeling uneasy, unable to sit still. Arya seemed to notice my discomfort and didn't say much. After dinner, I instinctively stood up to clean the dishes. Suddenly, Arya got up and took the dishes from my hands. She sighed with frustration and asked, "Did I scare you?" Her eyes were filled with sincerity and regret. "No," I stammered, unable to come up with an explanation. I tried to grab the dishes from her hands, but we ended up in a stalemate, both holding on to the dishes. I sighed. "How about we give it a try?" The moment those words left my mouth, I was shocked by my own impulse. Beauty truly has the power to cloud judgment. Arya froze, her eyes full of surprise and joy. I reached out to touch her hair. It was soft and fluffy. "I'll do the washing," I said, snatching the dishes from her hands and running off to the kitchen. When I returned to the living room, I found Arya still standing in the same spot, motionless. Her cheeks were flushed unnaturally and her eyes were brimming with tears. I chuckled. "Why are you crying?" She threw herself into my arms, sobbing softly, murmuring, "I'm so happy." The fragile kitten-like vulnerability she showed tugged at my heartstrings. She smelled faintly of camellias, a scent both gentle and refreshing. "I feel like having some wine to celebrate," Arya whispered, her eyes brimming with love as she looked at me. "Sure," I said, patting her head. She immediately dashed to the kitchen to cut some fruit and prepare glasses. By 10 o'clock that evening, we were sitting on the soft couch, drinking wine and watching a movie. At first, Arya seemed a little shy, sitting far away from me. Slowly, she inched closer. "Come sit here," I said, patting the spot beside me. I was a bit tipsy and ended up drinking quite a few glasses. By the end, I leaned against Arya, wrapped my arms around her waist, and asked the question I'd been afraid to ask all along. "Arya, how long have you liked me?" Her face turned red and she whispered softly, 6 years. 3 years in college, 3 years after you got married. I drifted into a deep sleep. When I woke again, the first thing I saw was a disheveled Arya fumbling nervously with the buttons of her nightshirt. I had sobered up almost completely, but Arya seemed like she had had too much to drink. Patiently, I helped her undo the buttons, only to realize it was her last piece of clothing. My mind was racing when she suddenly kissed me. Her kiss wasn't soft or restrained like her personality, it was fiery and passionate. As I gently touched her, my fingers brushed against her chest where I saw my name inked on her skin. It turned out her true love's mark was there all along. I kissed the mark softly. "Why aren't you sleeping?" she asked drowsily, searching blindly for my lips. Then she nestled sweetly into my arms. I felt so happy. Arya and I began living the life of an ordinary couple. She seldom went to bars anymore, seemingly busy with other work. Every evening she would come home on time to cook for me. Not wanting to waste my days idling, I started taking on freelance writing projects, working from home during the day and heading to Arya's place for dinner and movies at night. This peaceful and happy life lasted until one day, everything changed. During that period, Arya frequently went on business trips. I wanted to surprise her, so I secretly booked a flight to visit her. But when I arrived, I saw Arya dressed in professional attire, laughing and chatting with a man. I stood there stunned, watching them from afar. They looked so perfect together. Even though I knew Arya wasn't that kind of person, I couldn't help but wonder, was I truly worthy of her? Could I give her the happiness she deserved? At that moment, I felt like I lacked the courage to enter a second marriage. Even though I knew Arya loved me deeply, I couldn't shake the doubt. My thoughts swirled as I stared at my empty arms. Who was my true love, really? I called Arya. Her voice on the phone was as gentle as ever. "What's wrong?" she asked, sounding like she had just woken up. "Let's get married," I said softly. She hesitated for a moment. "Are you ready?" I fell silent. She repeated the same words, "Take your time." Suddenly, I lost the courage to face her. Did someone as loving as Arya know that I was such a coward, unable to even be certain about love? I left her a message saying I was going on a trip to find inspiration for my writing. Arya simply told me to stay safe. With my luggage in hand, I wandered for a week, then half a month. Arya seemed to sense that something was off and messaged me, asking when I'd be home. But I stayed away for an entire month, cutting off contact with everyone except a close friend I had informed beforehand. He was used to my disappearing acts, but asked me what I planned to do about Arya. After a month, I finally turned my phone back on to let my parents and friends know I was okay. Arya's last message to me was from 2 weeks ago. "I'll wait for you to come home." My heart sank into an icy pit. "I'm sorry," I replied, before tossing my SIM card into the trash. "I'm sorry, Arya. Right now, I don't think I have the courage to face it all." For the next 2 years, I settled in a quiet town in the south, running a small inn and welcoming guests from all over. At the time, I didn't know that Arya was pregnant with my child. She never told me, not wanting to burden me. And just like that, 2 years slipped by. The tiny embryo that had quietly taken root without my knowledge had now grown into a mischievous little rascal. Finally, after 2 long years, I returned to this city once again. This time, it was specifically to attend my ex-wife's engagement party. Despite the messy ending between us, she had sent me an invitation, insisting that I must come. At the engagement party, Summer looked at me as I made a grand entrance. I caught a fleeting look of shock in her eyes. "Are you married?" she asked, her face full of questions. Caught off guard, I was about to respond when I felt a tug at my leg. I looked down to find a tiny, chubby little munchkin clinging to me. "Daddy," the little one suddenly called out, leaving me utterly stunned. Before I could react, the little one wriggled free from my hand and ran off in another direction. I nodded slightly at Summer, not planning to explain the situation. I almost wanted her to misunderstand. Avoiding further interaction, I turned and followed the child. I soon saw him laughing as he flung himself into the arms of a woman in a suit. "Mommy." The woman gently raised her head. It was Arya. Arya had a child. And this child had somehow managed to find his real dad. "Long time no see," I greeted awkwardly. Arya pretended not to notice me. She softly stroked Lily's head, but Lily blinked and once again leapt into my arms, calling out, "Daddy?" Arya, seeing this, silently grabbed my hand. After a moment, she said, "Sit here." I had no choice but to pull up a chair and sit beside them. It was an oddly harmonious scene, like a family. I didn't know what to say, so I just ate my food in awkward silence. After the meal, I planned to leave first, but Lily clung to my hand and wouldn't let go. "Daddy, when can we meet again?" he asked, his innocent voice filled with sincerity. "Soon," Arya said softly, pinching his cheek. Then she turned her gaze toward me. Handing me a set of keys, her eyes were cold as she said, "I've been keeping your place tidy. Just move back in." Before I could refuse, she turned and walked away. I stood there stunned, watching as Arya's assistant waved at me from not far away. "Noah, let me drive you to her house." In the 2 years since I'd been apart from Arya, I felt like I had missed so much. When I returned to my old place, everything was just as I had left it 2 years ago, the arrangements, the furniture, everything. Lily happily jumped onto the sofa, but then suddenly grew pensive. "Daddy, can't you stay with me forever?" I patted his head but didn't know how to respond. Late at night, Lily had already fallen asleep when Arya, clearly drunk, knocked on the door. I immediately tensed up. When I opened the door, I saw her swaying unsteadily, but her eyes were strangely clear. "You still have the nerve to come back," she said with a helpless tone. 2 years. Her eyes were impossible to read, as though her emotions were buried deep. "I'm sorry," I murmured. "In these 2 years I've thought about a lot. I think we were ultimately the words were hard to get out." Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my arm. At the same time, Arya, as if guessing what I was about to say, lost her balance and fell against me. My arms, too weak to support us, gave way, and we both tumbled to the floor. "Daddy, Mommy, are you kissing?" Lily stood in the doorway, rubbing his sleepy eyes as he looked at us sprawled on the ground. "No," I quickly denied, raising my voice. "Go back to your room and sleep." Arya hastily tried to shoo Lily away, her actions almost as if she wanted to prove something. The proximity between us was intoxicatingly familiar. 2 years had passed, but the warmth of her presence was just as vivid. The sharp pain in my arm returned. When I pulled up my sleeve, I discovered Arya's name etched onto my skin. I stared at it in disbelief, then looked at Arya, the woman who had consumed my thoughts day and night. Could she truly be my one true love? Arya noticed my gaze and seemed annoyed. She leaned even closer, her face mere inches from mine. "Do you still love me?" I asked, my voice trembling as I dared to utter the question that had been buried deep in my heart. "What do you think?" She looked at me as if I were an idiot. "If I didn't love you, would I have waited for you for 2 whole years?" I stared at her pale, delicate face, momentarily dazed. I leaned in and kissed her gently, wrapping my arms around her waist. She didn't resist, letting me hold her as I kissed her. Encouraged, I slipped my hands around her neck, but still she remained motionless. Frustrated, I bit her hard, breaking off the kiss. Blinking, I whispered softly into her ear, "Arya, it's been 2 years. I've missed you." It felt as though time had turned back to 2 years ago, but now there was an adorable child in the picture. I watched Arya and Lily playing in the living room, a sight I could never have dared to dream of before. I ran my fingers over the name etched on my arm, Arya, my beloved Arya. She was the one I had longed for during sleepless nights in a quiet little town. In those 2 years I often felt lost and confused. I wished for Arya to come find me, but at the same time I was terrified of meeting her again. Do I believe in fate? Sometimes I would stare at my empty arm and think, maybe I should get a tattoo. A name that I had kept hidden in my heart. "Daddy, come here." Lily's excited voice called from across the room, pulling me back to the present. Arya was also looking at me intently, her eyes filled with a tenderness that seemed impossible to ignore. I smiled and ran toward the 2 people I loved most in the world. The power of love is both immense and fragile. Sometimes true love can fade with time, other times it only grows stronger. For me, love proved to be enduring and steadfast. Thankfully, my true love was both eternal and unwavering.